Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Left Wing Podcast. Will Slattery here with you, and we will be talking all things European rugby. It was a cracking round of 16 over the Easter weekend, and we have even more to look forward to this coming weekend as the quarter-final lineup promises to be even better. Delighted to be joined for this week's chat by Luke Fitzgerald. Luke, how are you?
Hey, Will. How are you?
Doing very well. As I said, a very exciting weekend of European rugby and more to come. And I'm also delighted to be joined by Cian Tracy. Cian, how are things?
Good, Will. Good, Luke. How are you, lads? Good to see you.
Yeah, always good to catch up at this time of year. A reminder that the Left Wing is sponsored by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the Energia AIL, and as official energy partner at the Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. The Irish provinces were busy over the Easter weekend. Leinster had the Easter Sunday slot, the graveyard shift, I think Leo Cullen called it after the game, and they got over the line against Edinburgh, but it was a 49-31. I don't know if you'd call it a thriller. It was certainly one of the more unique games I've seen. Leinster throwing 3 intercept tries in the first half to keep Edinburgh in the game, ultimately getting over the line to set up a game against Sale this Saturday. As I said, as part of a very good quarter-final lineup. We have Bath Northampton on Friday night, the two best teams in England. Glasgow Toulon on Saturday at 3. Then Leinster Sale at 5:30, and then Bordeaux Toulouse on Sunday at 3 p.m. What a game that promises to be. And then from a Challenge Cup perspective, on Good Friday, Connacht had a big win over the Sharks, 29-12. Munster, unfortunately, were the one losers from an Irish perspective over the weekend. I know Cian was in Sandy Park for that. Exeter 31, Munster 21. And then Ulster on Saturday night at Ravenhill got a 28-24 win over Ospreys to set up a game against Ronan O'Gara's La Rochelle this Friday in Belfast in the quarterfinals. And Connacht are away to Montpellier in the quarterfinals on Saturday. So all that to discuss today and to look forward to this weekend. But Cian, we might start with the Champions Cup game just because it's, I suppose, the premier competition. As I mentioned, Leinster 49, Edinburgh 31. Sale then to come this Saturday. Like, I don't know what you make of Leinster after watching a game like that. They scored 2 early tries through Tommy O'Brien. It looks like it might be a similar setup to last year when they played Harlequins and won comfortably and moved on. All of a sudden, the intercept tries start flowing like Van Rouge over in Cast, when you went there that time. Like 3 in the first half. I don't think I've ever seen 3 in a single game, let alone 3 in one half. And then Edinburgh got a bit of impetus. They got a try from Darcy Graham. And ultimately, Leinster's, I suppose, power and quality, told in the end, and they win by 18 points. But I don't know, they mixed some very good stuff with the ball in hand with some kind of crazy stuff with the ball in hand as well. Like, what's your assessment of where they're at after that game?
Well, that is the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? Where Leinster at? I think in your intro you said, was it a thriller? I think it was a great game, first of all, to watch. I mean, certainly from a neutral's point of view, I'm sure Leinster fans were, the ones who were there were shouting their heads off, but I'm sure the ones at home were banging their head on the table. Like, it's very hard to figure out where they are because they've hung their hat on trying to become this defensive team. And like, if anything, I think their defense has become worse than it was last year, and that's borne out in the results themselves. Obviously, they nilled Harlequins, wasn't it, in the round of 16, and then they went on and they nilled Glasgow in the quarter final last year. And like, if we're calling a spade, I think Edinburgh deserve a lot of credit because they certainly made it more of a game than I expected, and I'm sure you guys and most of our listeners expected as well. But they've had a really poor season by and large. They're not exactly one of the best attacks in Europe. And I think we were saying similar things about Scarlets last week, and we kind of not gave Leinster a free pass, but they were filtering guys back in after the Six Nations. But the Scarlets cut them apart as well. I mean, you think back to the first try, the little grubber kick in behind the defence. Now, I know obviously 3 of the tries came from Leinster not managing the ball in terms of it was the attack that coughed up to possession, but to concede that many points against a team that, again, like I said, isn't that hot, I think is a bit of a concern. Obviously, they're going to play Sale this weekend, and I would expect Leinster to get through to the semi-final. But if that's the case, and they're playing a team like Glasgow, and if they do go on further, I think they're in trouble, lads. I think I look at them and I just think a good team like a Bordeaux, a Toulouse, whoever it is that makes the final, even a Bath, I think will have the weapons to hurt this Leinster team. Just so sloppy with the ball. And I was quite critical. I have been quite critical of them in that I feel like if Leinster are to go on and win the Champions Cup, they can't just rely on their defence to get the job done. And they actually played with a bit more ambition and a bit more width last weekend, but their accuracy was just so poor. And I look at like the players making the mistakes, and I know it's not a like for like, but it was 14 Irish players, wasn't it? And an All Black in their starting 15. Like the majority of those guys, I know Harry Byrne wasn't involved in the Six Nations in terms of featuring, but the majority of those players were playing with Ireland, and by the end of the Six Nations looked really slick, really fluid in attack. And now they've come back in and they're wearing a blue jersey, and it just looks a bit, I think clunky will be a bit harsh because obviously they scored 7 tries. And by the way, some of the quality of the tries they scored was excellent. But again, this is not one of the best teams in Europe. And if they don't tighten up, I think they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, Luke, what's your perspective? Like, part of me, I do agree with what Cian is saying, but part of me says to myself, well, 3 intercepts in one half is kind of a freak occurrence. I'm not sure if you put that down to like massive Leinster mistakes or just something that occasionally could happen. And if you maybe took 1 or 2 intercept tries out of it, the scoreline could have a vastly different complexion. That even the flow of the game could be vastly different. So maybe Leinster weren't as bad as the scoreline and that kind of weird first half suggests, and maybe it was kind of more of a freak first half occurrence. Maybe that's a very charitable interpretation of what we watched, though. I don't know what you think.
I think there was a little bit of a bit of both can be true. Will, you know, I thought they were. This is a really weird take on this. I don't know. Do you remember Joe McCarthy doing this weird back pass in the second half? Do you remember? Do you remember this? It was off I think it was off an advantage. It was penalty. Maybe I think it was penalty advantage. I just remember thinking, like, how sloppy is this? Like, this is your kind of powerhouse second row. And I love John McCarthy. Really love watching him play. But I was like, it just seems symptomatic of that kind of like a mindset issue in there. Like, Joe McCarthy picks up a ball. I don't mind if he offloads, but like, you worry about dominating contact. You worry about you're doing the simple things around the pitch. You're not like, you know, Poitrino out there, you know, or so, you know, playing like one of these kind of old. I was just going to, what's happening here? How has the start of the game where they've kind of had 3 intercepts not fed through to them to say, lads, let's keep it tight, let's keep it simple. We can blow these guys away with their quality and accuracy. I see that kind of moment and I kind of go, what's happening in there? Like, how is that allowed? We would have absolutely killed someone doing that kind of stuff if we'd had a sloppy first half. I know our coach at the time, probably Leinster's best coach, Joe Schmidt, would have been tearing his hair out at something like that. It's such a small moment. I know it seems like really petty by me to pick it out, but to me, it just tells a bigger story about where they are kind of mentally, you know. And I would say, so what I would say on that is it's happened, and I think they'll. I hope that they'll clean them out in the meeting. That they'll have cleaned them out in the meeting yesterday. You know, I think I expect them to get it fixed. I just don't like how it's crept in initially, how it's allowed to creep in, how once you make one mistake, you kind of keep making, and then you do these kind of weird back passes and things. I just can't get my head around it. But I expect them to be to kind of fix that and to have been kind of slightly on the freaky side of things where it was just a bit kind of sloppy, right? So I don't expect that to be a problem going forward. What I would see as a bigger problem is probably the defense. Will, I think it's a really big problem for them. I think they got picked apart on a couple of occasions. That they kind of got away with it, and then, like, you know, I have felt for a long period of time that this defense is an issue when you get to that kind of harder grounds and better weather conditions. You look at what Toulouse and Bordeaux can bring out wide. I mean, they will destroy you out wide. The quality is just ridiculous if you're kind of anyway sloppy. And to me, there's a big thing in Leinster about their kind of their kind of recovery defense. You know, they're kind of and I just feel like they kind of pride themselves on that. But I would much rather be watertight up front and not give the teams opportunity to get in behind you to have to recover. And to me, I always feel like there's too much of that. Oh, our scramble defense was brilliant. I'm like, oh, you shouldn't have to scramble that much. You're way too good you're an international. You've got 35 internationals in your squad. Like, why are teams breaking you down so much? And I think if you can get rooks with a little bit of pace against them in the middle of the pitch, or not even in the middle of the pitch, but if you have a decent short side, you can pick them apart. They're easy to pick apart. I just don't get it. So I think they've got a big problem defensively. I think they'll get unpicked if they don't fix that against the better teams. I think if you look at Ireland's defense, I know Scotland scored a few great tries, but they had prolonged periods of very nice attacking rugby against Ireland. But Ireland managed it way better. It wasn't this kind of flying out of the line. And I think it was less easy. It's less predictable to play against, and it's harder to break down. And I thought that was the basis of Ireland's performance, even though everyone will talk about the attack. I thought the defence was what made Ireland so much better. That's what I loved about that Scottish performance. What was so poor against the French team at the start of the competition. That was the big change for me, was Ireland's defence. I just see, I'd love if Leinster move slightly away from that and manage it, particularly when there's rucks in the middle of the pitch, when there's kind of fast ball against them. So that's one thing that I would say. On the attacking side of the ball, yeah, look, I think I will say, I thought some of the passing, I mean, Rieko Ioane threw, like, there was a few weird ones as well, like that, you know the one Rieko Ioane throws out of the, like, that's a try scoring opportunity. He throws it off the pitch. Too good a player to be making those kind of mistakes. And I do think that they need to be a little bit more accurate there, a little bit better. I thought their attacking kicking could have been better as well at times. Just for kind of up and unders. There were some great competes. I thought Hugo Keenan had a few great catches, and it's great to see him back. I think he was outstanding for me, bar the missed tackle off the scrum break. I thought Keenan was outstanding for the whole game. I think he's a big part of the puzzle for Leinster. I think he'll open up the pitch for them and get the ball in those kind of very dangerous wingers' hands a lot. And he gives that solidity at the back for the most part. So he was brilliant. But I just was disappointed with some of the sloppiness. I think I've covered the intercepts, but there were kind of sloppy ones too, and guys not making the effort earlier, not being smart about kind of, even when there was an intercept happening. I saw Osborne just kind of throws his kind of hands up. You're kind of going, just give him a clip. You don't have to take him out. Just break his stride a little bit. Give someone a chance to catch it. There's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Osborne did give up on that one really early.
Really early. I was like, just at least step into him, make him run around you, break his stride slightly. There's 14 other players on the pitch. Someone might catch him if he doesn't have a clean run through on this one. So that's another one. And I'm going to circle back now, because I do think, just to Cian's point, I think it was very evident. You could see the power. The power is there. I think Leinster is still not a team to be trifled with. I think they have to win, probably. I think they're better than Bath. I think they'll beat Bath. No, I don't see that much of an issue. Bath were good. I thought they looked strong. The scrum was very good. Jesus, it was really good. But Leinster have enough to manage them there, and I think they can beat them. The two French teams are the issue, and Leinster will have to save their, like, by far their best performance of the year for if they can get. I think they will get that far. They've got to produce a performance that we just haven't seen in a long time, and there's a lot of issues to fix, guys. And
what about Glasgow, Luke? If they play, what about Glasgow? If they played Glasgow, I think that Glasgow attack, and I know it's like the bulk of the Scottish team, but I think Franco Smith's done a great job there, and we will have the same old questions about the pack and the power that you're saying, but. Wow, like, I look at that Glasgow attack and I think that they have the weapons to open up Leinster in a potential semi-final as well if it gets that stage.
Yeah, I can see that, Cian. Yeah, I mean, there's lots to like about Glasgow. I think they're gritty. I think they have a bit of belief in them, but I just do think that Leinster will have too much for them. That's my belief. As I said, I think we probably need to see a little bit more. And I think that, look, they won't have to go to the levels they'll have to go to if they want to beat Glasgow in terms of beating Bordeaux and Toulouse. I still think they are a level above Glasgow. But I think Leinster are a level above too. It's just tighter, and I think they'll bring in that belief that they have against the Scottish teams. Do you know what I mean? I just think they nearly always come out on top against them when it's really counted, and I think they'll have just too much power. Ryan is looking. I think he's back in this week, isn't he? I think that's the talk anyway. You think you bring him back in? You got Byrne in there. You got Conan. You just got so much power, guys, and I just think they'll have just too much for them.
We probably would have said something similar. Is the only thing though about the Northampton game last year, and the way Northampton played, like, it's just obviously still in my head, and I see similarities between what Glasgow could do, because we would have said the exact same, that Leinster pack will have too much for Northampton, but if you play the right way, I think you can still get at them. So look, I know we're obviously jumping ahead to a game that's not even scheduled yet, but if it goes the way we expect, I think Glasgow, especially away from home, Leinster aren't used to playing knockout games in Europe away from home, and it'll probably be on in Murrayfield rather than Scotstoun. But I think that's another potential banana skin for Leinster as well.
Yeah, just look.
It's tricky. I mean, they've had a few good ones against. Maybe I suppose it's against the English opposition, and how do you know? Like, I'm thinking of the ones kind of some of the Leicester matches and things like they've gone away and got big results. They've got a big one against La Rochelle away. I know not knockout, but I don't know. I think this team is I think they've got enough in them to get the job done, Cian. I get the point, and I think Glasgow are dangerous, but I don't know. I still have a belief that these guys that this could be Leinster's year. I just feel like I haven't seen much. Maybe I'm just sticking to my initial. Like when I see Toulouse and Bordeaux on the same side of the draw, I'm always like, okay, well, you got one big. Can you get yourself up for one big match? And I think they can do that, and they should have enough for the other teams, even if it's away from home. There's so much quality in this team. I think we're seeing the attacking side develop, just with that little bit of sloppiness that I think they'll sort out. And I think I'm sticking to my original. I think they've got the one big performance in them, and I don't think it's required for Glasgow. I think they'll have enough for them. I think they have enough firepower. So, just sorry to interrupt, Will. It's just an interesting point, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, no, well,
I could have egg in the face there, but I just still think there's too much power there.
Well, the draw is just so intriguing the way it ended up working out. Like obviously said, Bordeaux taking on Toulouse at the quarter-final stage. That's because it wasn't because it was random. Toulouse lost 2 pool games. They lost to Glasgow, the team we're talking about in Glasgow. They also lost to Saracens, which put them, as a much, much lower seed. And the Bordeaux-Toulouse game, if Bordeaux win, they're at home in the semi-finals. But if Toulouse were to win, they'd actually have to go away to either Bath or Northampton. So like there's so much to play for on both sides of the draw. Even Glasgow-Toulon, it could be a brilliant game on paper. And I think Glasgow deserve a lot of credit for their win over the Bulls. Like, to be fair, we often criticise the South African teams, but the Bulls picked a full-on team and gave it a good rattle in the Stormers-Toulon game. For people who might have seen that, went down to the last play of the game as well. The Stormers looked like they might win it, but then just came up just short. So lots to play for going into this weekend. Cian, just to go back to one or two other aspects of that Leinster game. A lot of people were interested when Harry Byrne was picked, how that might go. Sam Prendergast wasn't in the squad. I just was reading Leo Cullen, obviously was asked about it a fair bit beforehand, and was giving his, basically saying, it's just for this weekend, we're going with it to see how it goes. But I think people were pretty impressed with Harry Byrne. I don't think people blamed him too much for the game kind of going a bit haywire. Like, his kicking from the deck was brilliant, obviously 7 from 7, and it's funny, after the conversation we had last week, literally about like goal kicking and its importance, for him to be slotting touchline conversions throughout the game, I think was very impressive. How do you think he played generally? He had some nice touches in the early stages as well when Leinster's attack was looking good. Did you think he had a good overall game, or does he deserve some culpability maybe for the game going a bit kind of haywire for a while?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. I think he was much improved on the previous week, even though he did lots of things well against the Scarlets. But I thought he lacked a little bit of control in that game, and I think you could say the same again in this game. It obviously wasn't all on him, but of course the 10 is the one going to be in the firing line when the team loses their way a little bit, and I think that's probably the one major piece of the puzzle that Harry Byrne has to put together. Like, his rebirth has been remarkable when you consider that he was sent on loan to Bristol last season, and now he is, I would say, undoubtedly Leinster's first choice 10. I know Leo Cullen was doing a bit of mental gymnastics there, trying to avoid and a little bit protect Sam Prendergast after what has been, God, such a difficult few months for him. Like, what is he, 23 years old, have started the Six Nations as Ireland's first choice, have been bombed out of the 23 by the end, and now the exact same thing has happened. Leinster, and the guy who's on the bench ahead of him isn't going to be at the club next season. So I think Harry Byrne has done very well. I think he's come back from Bristol a lot more confident. He still has, we saw his array of passing at the weekend, but I think he's a little bit more mature. He doesn't always try and look for that killer pass. His kicking, like you said, Will, 7 out of 7 was much improved, and generally he has kicked quite well, I think, as well. I know he had a bad day against the Scarlets, which we obviously touched on last week, but like, if Leinster were to win the Champions Cup with Harry Byrne at out half, I think would be a remarkable story. I still think there's a nagging doubt in the back of my mind when it comes to, again, the crunch potentially in a final, if he is the 10 to get the job done. Generally, you look at the roll of honour between the teams who've won the Champions Cup. I know there are a couple of exceptions thrown in there, but generally it is a world-class 10 who has won the Champions Cup for their respective teams. I don't quite think Harry Byrne is in that bracket yet, but I think he is Leinster's undisputed first choice right now.
Yeah, for sure. And Luke, as I mentioned earlier, like, the goal kicking was actually very crucial at the weekend, in the sense that I know Leinster ended up pulling away and winning by a lot, but when Darcy Graham scores that wonder try, it puts Edinburgh, I think, 31-28 ahead. Edinburgh had missed 2 conversions, and Byrne had slotted 4 touchline conversions. On another day, that scoreline could actually have been a bit different. Edinburgh might have been like 9 points ahead if the kicking had gone a little better towards them, and maybe Byrne even misses one conversion potentially. So it was vital.
Absolutely. Like, it is so key that your goal kicker gets the ball over the bar kind of 80% to 85% at a minimum. 100% is a complete bonus, you know. So I think it's a massive part of his game. I actually thought he was really good. I thought he looked very control. It's interesting, isn't it? Just two people watching the same game. I thought some of his attacking kicks could have been a little bit better. I thought some of the ones, the up and under, some of them were good. Cian got a lovely one back in I think it was the first half. But some of them were they could have been better. I thought some of the kicks to compete. I thought he probably could have used it more. I probably would have liked to have seen him as well, boss a little bit more, and maybe take one of those penalties rather than go to the corner. Now, they were on top of Edinburgh, and they probably could blow them away. But I think in the bigger games, I'd like to see him slot a few of them. Kind of like a Ramos. You just go, here, listen, get your captain to go, Byrne, knock that over. Let's take 3. I think that's going to be important if they go later in the competition. I thought his tackling was pretty good. It's not going to be as good as Frawley's, but it's certainly in the middle between that and Prendergast. And it gives you the solidity. To me, I feel like that is going to be so important for Leinster to get that fixed, and they need to have someone in there who can tackle. So to me, it's really clear cut who the guy is now. I think he wasn't at fault, I didn't think, for any of the tries. So, the loose play. And as a matter of fact, I think, it was kind of unlucky. They were about to split them, I think, on the furlong one. If it goes to Osborne's hand, it's a very nice attacking position. But I thought Harry Byrne had kind of spotted that quite nice. And I thought he actually fired a lovely pass. I don't know who it was to originally. It might have been to Doris maybe before it got to Furlong's hands or someone. But it was a nice spot. I think might have been off a turnover. But yeah, I thought he played really well. I was really pleased with him. I think he the more time he gets in the position, the more settled he'll look. I do think on the attacking side of the ball, I think I'd like to see him get the ball less as well. I think they could do more of what Ireland have been really good at. It's a good bit of the Ireland pack there. I would like to see them have that interplay amongst the forwards a bit more. I think they fell in love a little bit, and they can do. Leinster, I think, are a little bit guilty of this sometimes, and it can happen to any team who's on top of another team a lot. Is that you start bossing the ball out of those forward pods a lot more, and it kind of becomes a little bit easier to defend against you, a little bit more readable. And I think you should use when I think of Leinster, I would be thinking of battering teams in those kind of tight exchanges and using the forwards in ball handling abilities to attack teams in there and to get your really obvious kind of opportunities to get the ball. I don't think it needs to come out of the forward pod as much as they're getting it. So I think they could be a little bit more direct there. And that is something I think Byrne will be in charge of a lot. So I think he could improve that, I think, Cian. And that can be difficult to do. You see Prendergast doing it a lot with Ireland as well. But I thought what Jack Crowley was really good at is I thought he let the Ireland forwards play a little bit more. They took a little bit more ownership as well. But I think that's the next step for Byrne, is that he needs to let the guys develop a bit more play in the tighter parts of the pitch and not get, it can be it feels nice to get the ball out the back of the pod, but it's probably not as effective for you over the game. It'll open up more opportunities if you can be more direct and if you can punch gaps through teams, which the Leinster forwards can. There's some really great carriers there. It's got some real power in that Leinster pack and some nice ball handlers. I'd let them truck it up a little bit more. I think it'll open up more obvious opportunities and better opportunities for the Leinster backline if he can allow them to do it. But it's hard to when you're in position, it's hard not to call for it. You know what I mean, Will? So that's something I think he could do a little bit better, as well as the attacking kicking.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We're assuming he'll start again this weekend, and it's probably the starting 10.
Really has to.
Yeah.
Has to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming Leo Cullen was kind of saying that, as Cian said, maybe just to, I suppose, spare Sam Prendergast a bit in a press conference, rather than actually saying, no, it's only this weekend and we might make a change. Byrne definitely looks like the person in possession of the jersey. Cian, what did you make of Rico Ioanni's celebration for his try? It definitely struck me as someone who's been listening to the criticism, like cupping his ear on Easter Sunday in a small crowd of just Leinster supporters. I'm like, who's he talking to there by cupping that ear? Like, because the only people at this game are people cheering for you, Rico. But obviously, I think it must be the criticism he maybe got in the build-up.
Yeah, I was laughing actually when he did it, Will, because didn't I say in the pod last week, your good friend Darcy Graham, if he scores, maybe he could do and he did score, but he obviously didn't do it. Yeah, look, I I don't know. Has he had that much criticism? I mean, I think it's fair to say that pound for pound, he's been a disappointment in terms of the signing. I actually thought, I know Luke pointed out one wild pass that he threw into touch, but I actually thought it was one of his better games for Leinster, and I thought he looked better when he went out wide onto the wing. It'd be very interesting to see. Like, I'm not saying it was a surprise that Jimmy O'Brien started at the weekend, but I was expecting JJ Kenny to keep his place in the team. I think he's been pretty good this season. He's not the finished article just yet, but I thought they might have went with him, but obviously they went for the more experience in Jimmy O'Brien. But if Gary Ringrose is back this week, which it sounds like he might be, I'd be very interested to see if they go with a centre partnership of Jamie Osborne and Gary Ringrose, with maybe Rico Ioane on the left wing. I thought he did pretty well. Obviously, that's where he broke through when he was coming through. The pass, by the way, that Gibson Park threw for his try. Oh,
Magic.
What a bullet. Yeah.
just top notch. And I know obviously he throws a nice dummy at the end and spectacular finish in the corner and the cup in the ears. But
it was a stinker by Graham. Honestly, after all the chat, like, come on, like, just tackle the guy. He was well covered on the inside. Like, so sometimes you got to make the guy throw the pass.
He definitely wasn't going to be cupping his ear after that.
I was waiting for someone to compliment that. Sorry, Cian, you fell into the trap there. I was like, no, that was stinking defense.
I'm giving Rico some credit because he cupped his ear. But yeah, like, I mean, he can cup all his ears all he wants, Will. He's here to deliver the Champions Cup for Leinster, and he needs to play well in the remaining games of the season that they're in the Champions Cup. And if he does that, Leinster fans will remember him very well, and all the average performances he's had, because there's been quite a few in the URC, I think will be forgiven a little bit. But I wouldn't be getting too ahead of myself by scoring, a nice try. I'm going to give him credit for it against an Edinburgh team. Let's see again when it comes to the crunch. But it was encouraging at least to see him moving in the right direction, because I just don't think we have seen enough from him in by and large.
Yeah, and it looks like Gary Ringrose will be available for this weekend, so you'd assume he would go back into number 13, and then does Ioane go to the bench? Robbie Henshaw wore 23 last weekend, so there's a couple of different moving parts there to see later in the week when the team is named. So yeah, Leinster play Sale 5:30 this Saturday in the Aviva Stadium, a 6-day turnaround. Be interesting to see what team Leo Cullen picks, as I mentioned. We might get predictions on that at the end, but we'll move on to Munster, but after this break. Exeter 31, Munster 21 in Stanley Park. Cian, you were obviously there at the weekend. We discussed it in the build-up, what kind of team Munster would go with. They went with Jack Crowley, Craig Casey, Byrne was back, so they really were going after it. But, God, what a horror show it was in Exeter. 31-0 down at half-time. Talk about intercept tries. Like, Munster had kind of two of their own on Saturday, which we thought would be as worse as it got for the Irish provinces in that regard, but not so, as we saw on Sunday. Questionable tactics into the win in the first half. The line-out was really, really poor. They actually had some opportunities in that first half to get some scores on the board and to mitigate the damage when they would have the win at their back in the second 40, but it was just too much of a mountain to climb. That's now 8 losses from their last 10 games. They're out of Europe. Their only pathway to the Champions Cup is getting top 8, which will be maybe a tricky end to the season. But what were your thoughts on that Munster performance?
Big deep breath. Yeah, like, I don't think the final score was a fair reflection on how much better Exeter were, and we can give Munster credit for winning the second half 21-0 and all that. And you know what? I was so glad and relieved that neither Byrne or Clayton Macmillan afterwards even attempted to reach for that. Clayton Macmillan actually said it's the 31-0 that we need to focus on here, not the 31-21. Because I think a lot of head coaches would have been like, looking for moral victories. And I think there's been too much of that. Maybe even there was an element of it the previous week against the Bulls when they got 2 losing bonus points. Yeah, you mentioned the tactics, Will, in terms of playing into the wind. I watched the game back. The TV didn't do it justice. I don't think how strong the wind actually was. It was a proper gale. Everyone remember, I probably heard like the loads of the flights even back into Dublin that day were cancelled, and it was the same over in Devon. But I actually managed, or just by pure chance, I managed to get a video of the coin toss before the match, because for some weird reason they did it out in the pitch and I was just there early, and Munster won the toss. And like the second it became clear that Munster won it, Byrne was like pointing to play against the wind. So quite clearly it was something which they would have spoken about, that if you win the toss, let's play against the wind. That to me would have spoken to a team, have a game plan prepared. How are we going to go about playing into this wind? And then when they did win the toss, they actually looked like they hadn't got a clue how to play into the wind. I thought they were really tactically naive. They didn't go to contestables enough. They didn't try and pin them back into the corner enough. And I thought the Exeter defence was very, very good for the most part. Munster broke them at one point in the first half. Just weren't able to finish it when Jack Crowley got the ball. But I thought Exeter were very good and they made the most of Munster's sloppiness. I mean, you touched on the 2 intercepts. I mean, the pass that Ben O'Connor threw was just like so wild, absolutely so wild. Was never on in a million years, and obviously they ate it up. And I hadn't seen a whole pile of Exeter this season, I'll be honest. And kind of when you're looking at the Premiership table and you see they're in 4th, sometimes I'm a bit reluctant to go, oh, they must be very good, because the English League, the Premiership, can be a bit hit and miss. But I was very impressed with them. They've had a tough couple of years, and I thought they were excellent. I thought Faye Boso on the wing, like, wow, what a player. Now, his try was stunning from a Chiefs point of view, but I know what you're going to say, Luke, and I'm coming to it. It was an absolute horror show from a Munster point of view, falling off tackles. And it's been a bit indicative of their season, Will, to date. That's their their 8th defeat in their last 10 games. They've backed themselves into a huge corner now in terms of qualifying for next season's Champions Cup. But I think they only had themselves to blame at the weekend. The damage was done in that first half, but they were just so naive in how they played into that wind.
Feo Boso, when he's in full flight, it's like absolutely unbelievable. It reminded me, that try reminded me of, like, you know, when you played Jonah Lomu rugby back in the day, and like there's a team when everyone is Jonah Lomu and like you just can't stop him, like no matter what he does, where he gets the ball. It was kind of that kind of try. And it's funny you mentioned, you know, say the Slade intercept try, and we discussed Jamie Osborne not running back. Takir Abrahams gives up on that, like. Yeah. He's your fastest player in your team, like, and he doesn't even try to chase. He would have been able to chase down Henry Slade if he'd actually run after him. It was bizarre.
I'm glad you mentioned it, Will, because when you were talking about Osborne, the first thing that came to my head was like why Takir Abrahams, like you said, didn't run back after it, and I thought it just spoke of a team just not on it, and they came up against a very, very good team, a team actually who I think will have a good chance of going all the way in the Challenge Cup. But to have dropped down from the Champions Cup, you know, and to be gone at the first hurdle is just so disappointing. But like I said, I think they only have themselves to blame.
Yeah, Luke, what did you make of the game?
Do you know what? I think, like, it was disappointing. It was just disappointing. I really thought they'd do better. I felt there was some improvement from the kind of in the Bulls game. There was enough to go, okay, look, we probably should have done the business there, but you could see the positivity. You could see I thought we saw a bit of cohesiveness in the group, a bit of fight, and I just didn't. The first half was just a complete mess, you know. And it's maybe a bit indicative maybe what's going on behind the scenes there. You know, I think all these things kind of feed through a little bit at the moment. So it's a very unsettled period for Munster, you know, and I think it's difficult to see a way out at the moment for them. I think they need to regather themselves pretty quickly and focus. Obviously, easy to focus on the league now, but they need to get it together. And I just don't see an easy solution at the moment. You know, it seems like it's amazing from the start of the season how we've kind of got here, but it's not nice to watch, and it's worrying. I think that, you know, they're senior players, as much as the coach, like, there's a bit of kind of few moving parts with the coach. I think the senior players need to gather up the squad pretty quickly and get everyone, you know, on the same page and focus, and whether that's simplifying the game plan or whatever it is. They need to be very clear about what they're trying to achieve. And like, you go over to a place like Sandy Park. I've played there myself. Difficult place to go and play. Regardless of how good or bad the Premiership is, they're still tough teams to play at home, and it's a tough pitch. So to, you know, go out and not look that, not prepared, or not that, you know, have that much clarity in how you were going to play against that win in a difficult away ground, that's not a good look, you know. And then the Veo Bosi try, I just thought it was so bad, guys. Like, someone has got to put a hit on him. You know what I mean? Like, you need to grind. Like, I feel like I'm repeating myself all the time, but you've got to defend. Like, away from home, you're going to have to defend for periods, particularly with that win. You needed to be up for that and ready for it, and know that he was going to be a threat. And you kind of defend someone like him in twos. You don't leave him in one-on-one scenarios. And if you do, you front up, and I was just disappointed, guys. The way they fell off those tackles and didn't get him to ground, I thought it was I thought it was terrible. I think Cian's point was right. I mean, if you're an extra supporter, you're saying like, "Wow, isn't that amazing?" But if you're a Munster supporter, you're going, "Guys, like, what's going on? Where are the heads at here? Like, make them work hard for their tries at least. Don't make them look. He's good, but he's not a superstar. To me, he's not a superstar. He's not like a Byrne where you can't catch him. He has that physical component where he's hard to stop. But you know that if you've watched video on him, you know that. You know when if you're there to put a shoulder on him, you got to stick it because he's going to blast through. It's not like a Byrne can make you look stupid with the pace, and some of the tries look easier than they should. It's not really an effort thing with him, I don't think. But with Feo Bosi, there's a bit of an effort thing because he's a physical specimen too. So you know you're going to have to put a real shoulder on him or tackle him in twos. That was really disappointing to me. I think to be honest, Will, aside from the lack of cohesion in the first half, that was a really disappointing moment, if you like. There was so many people fell off tackles on him.
Yeah. Cian, what kind of pressure is Clayton McMillan under? Obviously, it's his first year, so there's going to be a bit of, I suppose, period of flux as he tries to put his own stamp on things, and like it's not gone well. Like, obviously, eliminated from the Champions Cup early doors, as you were saying, like, they're not even good enough for the second tier competition now, judging what we're seeing, like getting beaten so badly by Exeter. The league is becoming a struggle. Like, their last 4 games are Benetton away, Ulster home, Connacht away, and Lions at home. Like, no gimmies there. Like, there's no easy wins there. Like, so to get into the Champions Cup, they're going to have to be a lot better than they've been. And obviously, it's like not the first year he would have envisaged. Munster supporters would have envisaged when he was hired with like a good bit of fanfare, considering he had a decent record with the Chiefs. It's been a tough opening, whatever 8 months it's been.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the Clayton McMillan Munster era is stuck in neutral, really. I think he absolutely deserves time to turn it around. I mean, we've asked him a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, has the job been bigger than what he thought? And of course, he's saying publicly that it's not, that he knew it was going to be a long-term project, and I think that is absolutely the case. But privately, I wonder if, with the financial difficulties that are going on behind the scenes, the lack of quality in the squad, like if we're going to call a spade here, I mean, I thought that was shown up in a big way last weekend. I thought the Munster back row was completely outplayed. I thought the Munster back 3 were by and large pretty poor as well. And there is a distinct lack of quality. They're better than what they showed, don't get me wrong, at the weekend, but there's too many players, some of whom are coming towards the end of their career, who are still hanging on in there. I mean, and fair play that they are, the likes of John Ryan, the likes of Niall Scannell. There's lads they're cutting the squad at the end of the season. So there's going to be a good few departures. They've signed the South African hooker Van der Merwe, isn't it, from the Scarlets. I think Jack Ainger is on his way from Connacht. Takir Abrahams is going to be going back to the Bulls, is my understanding, and Munster aren't going to look to sign a like-for-like NIQ there because they want to use the non-Irish qualified spot for a tight head. But again, my understanding here is that I don't know if they're going to be able to sign, number one, be allowed to sign with the IRFU, obviously needs to be signed off on, and number two, going to be able to get a world-class tight head this side of the World Cup. So it might be that they have to wait for it after the World Cup, when there'll obviously be a bit of moving and shaking to get that tight head, which, I mean, how many years have we been beating this drum that Munster are short in the front row? They've obviously addressed it now by going out and getting a South African hooker for next season, and for sure he'll make a difference. But where Munster are at right now in terms of their recruitment, and again with the really worrying financial backdrop to all this, it reminds me a bit of what Andy Friend said about Connacht a few years ago, when he said that they have to shop in Aldi while the likes of Leinster are shopping in Brown Thomas. I think there's a bit of that for Munster now at the moment. I don't think they have the kind of money in the bank to go out and sign these top class, world class players, I should say, like they have done in the past. So Mike Prendergast is obviously going to Bath at the end of the season. There's going to be a new attack coach coming in. Clayton McMillan told us that Roger Randall, the Chiefs attack coach, his agent was in touch and he's putting his hat in the ring. He said that there's coaches from Australia, from all around Super Rugby, New Zealand, who've thrown their hat in the ring. So Munster as a province still has the allure, but they need to get that appointment right. And I think, he is going to look to bring in his own man. He came in, he brought his own manager, team manager, and his own S&C, but other than that, he hasn't been working with coaches that he worked with, and clearly it hasn't worked with Mike Prendergast, which I know I've said on the show before in the past. I think it's such a disappointment that Mike Prendergast is leaving, and I see a lot of people and friends of mine getting on to me as well, sort of saying, what's happened, Munster's attack, and that Mike Prendergast won't be a loss when he leaves at the end of the season. But I think people have to be very careful and think of the bigger picture when they say stuff like that, because I think back to Munster's best attacking day this season was undoubtedly in Croke Park earlier this season, and I think Mike Prendergast's stamp was all over that. But I think as the season's gone on, it's been a bit more about Clayton McMillan trying to put his stamp on the teams, and I don't necessarily know if Mike Prendergast's philosophy on attack marries up to how he wants to play the game. I think he's a little bit more pragmatic. So it seems like that Munster going through another rebuild under Macmillan, but I think next season, in terms of whoever the attack coach that comes in, is maybe not going to be a like-for-like replacement for Mike Prendergast, which is going to mean there's going to be even more teething issues. I think their defence as well has been really poor this season. They've developed this awful habit of conceding an mountain of points in one go. Obviously, you think back to the Sharks 3 weeks ago. You think back to Bath. Did they go 21 or 28-0 down in that game? I think they lost the second half up in Ulster 22-0. So, is the defence in flux? Is Clayton McMillan trying to put a stamp on that as well? There's a lot going on, lads, behind the scenes, and I did sort of touch on this a couple of weeks ago in the pod in terms of the financial difficulties. Obviously, that's come to light now, and it's still going on. It doesn't directly impact the province in terms of their budget in that, but I think it's a heavy weight for the players and coaches knowing that they're fighting to get into the Champions Cup for next season, which could mean saving people's jobs in the back office as well. Not to sound overly dramatic, but I think that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, but those things can be. I think that could be important for them, Cian. I think they need something to kind of galvanize themselves, or sometimes you just need a bit of desperation. I would say the worrying thing about the weekend is that, and I go back to this it's one try, right? But you go back to that, if you're a desperate side, someone's making that tackle, and desperate sides will kind of, they're kind of like a cornered rat. You need a bit of that mentality at this time. They need something, and to me, that wasn't really that evident. So if that is weighing heavy on you, at least make it show on the kind of physical side of the game, because rugby, it's funny how you can kind of turn things around quickly, and this is a low ebb for Munster. I think I'm hoping this is the lowest of the ebbs for them. I hope they finish the league campaign strongly, because I think that's going to be seriously important for them. But I think they can do it. They've got good players. Yes, they don't have the depth, but they have good players in kind of important positions that can have a big influence on players around them. They're the guys who are touching the ball the most. They're the guys who are in decision-making parts of the team. So they have quality there in key positions, and they have enough there for me to be good. I don't know what's happened. To me, it feels like a big issue seems to have been McMillan not bringing in his staff initially, as much as we would like, and I've heard great things about Prendergast. I don't know him that well, but I've heard, good, top fella as well. But it seems like that his role was reduced from what I'm hearing over the course of that, which it seems like it's fairly obvious. And it looks like that hasn't been effective. But then you have this kind of tension between the coaching staff ongoing, and players can kind of feel that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So to me, it seems like it was a mistake. McMillan seems like he's a big personality. At the end of the day, the book stops with him. So to me, I would have been insisting on bringing my own guys in rather than trialing that, particularly if he probably should have known that he's a big personality. At this stage of your life, you should probably know that. So it was always going to have to be, it was always a potential that could have been a tricky situation with Prendergast. So yeah, I don't know. To me, it feels like, that seems like it's a bit of an error that he didn't insist on bringing in his own guys. To at least say, because the last thing you want to have is some kind of excuse saying, I didn't have my own people there. And as I said, you have that little bit of tension with the coaching staff in situ, because, someone who's done what I would say is a pretty good job for the most part in Prendergast, from what I can see and from what I hear, then having a reduced role, that's obviously going to piss someone like that off. You know what I mean? So, I don't know if that feels like it's a bit of an error to have not insisted on that. Sorry, just to interject, just from just the outside opinion, maybe.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if Roger Randall is the person who comes in, someone who has worked closely with Clayton McMillan, or who ends up getting that job. An interesting thing that you mentioned, Andy Friend, and I suppose his comment about Connacht's recruitment, because if Munster are working off a reduced budget or needing to maybe be a bit more judicious who they sign. Like, I think Andy Friend did prove when he was the kind of coach that you can get kind of bargains or unheralded guys to come over and play a big role. Like, even at the moment, like Sean Jansen, who's playing for Connacht, is like, anyone could have bought him theoretically. Like, he's not as if he would have been some superstar name, and he's playing really well this season. Like Seamus Hurley-Langton, who's had injury issues, had a really good game at the weekend. He's another one that I suppose would have been available. So maybe they just need to be a little more clever in how they recruit and kind of go off the beaten track in that regard. One small silver lining, considering they were knocked out, is Jack Crowley's performance was pretty good as well. Even though the Bulls game was a defeat and Exeter was a defeat, I think at least you can point to him and say he's in like the Six Nations form that we saw at the back end of the tournament, and it looks like he's carrying through. And it hasn't translated to wins yet, but maybe in these last 4 URC games, which are so vital, he might be able to kind of lead them over the line.
Yeah, he was excellent. I wrote that in my match report afterwards, that like, where would Munster have been on Saturday in terms of the scoreline without Jack Crowley? You're dead right, Will. I think he's come back, and it's not as easy, whatever about going back into a Leinster team that's packed full of Ireland players, particularly Ireland forwards who you're going to be playing behind. It's not as easy to go back into that Munster team who were struggling and to just pick up where you left off. And obviously himself and Casey were excellent in Pretoria the previous week, and I thought that Crowley was excellent. Sandy Park, Luke just kind of touching it there. It's a really, for any of the listeners who've been there, and it's a brilliant away trip, by the way. There was plenty of Munster supporters over the weekend. It's a really good town, great place to watch rugby, really friendly club. But Sandy Park itself, and like I said, Luke will know all about it, the crowd are very much on top of you, but it also means that, like, from your vantage point of where you're watching the game, you can almost hear the players talking, because I think it was 11,000 at the match on Saturday. It felt like a lot more, but you can just hear Jack Crowley's influence in terms of his chat to his players, his chat to the officials as well. He was giving the touch judge a bit of a bollocking a couple of times because he didn't give him what he felt was enough change on his kicks to the corner. His 50-22 was an absolute beaut. Like, obviously the standout moment is the second try that he scored at the end, but I thought his first try, he took it really well as well. And like, if Munster had 15 Jack Crowleys on the pitch at the weekend, they would have had a very good chance of winning, and I think he did extremely well in the circumstances. And look, it's brilliant that we obviously touched on the Leinster situation, that like how the Ireland situation played out for Jack Crowley, I think would have really hurt him. But he has really rediscovered his best form, as we saw throughout the Six Nations for Ireland, and now we're seeing it in red for Munster as well. And if Munster are going to get that top 8 in the URC, Will, like you said, for the remainder of the season, Jack Crowley is going to be absolutely central to that.
Yeah, he looked really good. Let's move on to Connacht, Luke. Connacht 29, Sharks 12 on Good Friday. 6 wins in a row for them for the first time since their league winning season 10 years ago. So that's how long it's been, and I suppose a measurement of how good they've been the last couple of weeks. Once again, their defence was very impressive. Like, they didn't concede a try to the Sharks. I know the Sharks weren't completely locked and loaded, but there was some quality players there, and in particular in that first half when the Sharks had the conditions. Have it written here, Connacht made 117 tackles in the first half, 94% tackle success rate, which a few weeks ago even, or maybe a few months ago, would have even seemed unlikely. But it's kind of been the bedrock of this kind of renaissance. We've touched on it last week as well.
Well, to me, it was always the obvious place to start with Connacht, wasn't it? Like, it's to try and fix that. I think if you can do that, you've got a shot. Like, they have quality behind the ball. They've got some really nice runners in that pack. So they've got some power in the pack. You'd worry maybe latter stage of the competition around potentially maybe scrum line. Would a bigger pack, cause some serious problems for them potentially. But it doesn't mean you can't have a great defense. And I think I've been really, really pleased to see that. It's been something I've been calling for the last couple of years with them. I think if you have that kind of in place, it gives you a really solid foundation to be competitive every single week. And then all you need to do is kind of get some consistency with the ball in hand. And for Connacht, obviously, it's going to be keeping kind of some key guys fit as well. That's always a big thing for them. Is that can they keep as many of the frontliners fit as possible, because they make a big impact there. But they've got a great coach. He's going to be good on the attacking side of the ball. You're going to have enough. Can you sort out the defense? I think that's been the key thing, Will. That is the key difference between this Connacht team and some of the teams last year, and it gives you so much confidence if you can stick it out for a couple of phases against another team with good attacking options. And you saw what it does. Keep going back to it. You saw what it did to Scotland. It takes the wind out of your sails when you go through lots of phases against a team and you get no pay for it, and it gives you a massive lift as the defending team. And if you can, if you have enough energy and you've got the kind of a clear game plan on the attacking side of the ball, it's a great way to break a team down mentally. If you can stick it out defensively and then go up the other side of the pitch and score a few tries, God, it really knocks the wind out of the sails of the opposition. So great to see. I think Lancaster's done a brilliant job. It's great to see him. He looks happy now. I don't know if you saw the interview after. I think it might have been on off the ball, but really, really positive. He looks happy down there. I think that looks like it's going to be a great coaching appointment. I'm glad we all reserve judgment at the start of the season until kind of now to give him a little bit of time to put his stamp on things. 6 in a row is a serious result. I know it was during Six Nations and that, so they're not as impacted, but still got to win those games. And he's done a great job. And now he's winning some of the tough ones. And so just shows you what a bit of momentum can do. And it'd be interesting to see how they finish the leagues, the ending of the league, guys. I mean, got some reasonably tricky fixtures in there, but I'd be kind of bullish enough on Connacht at the moment, provided they can keep everyone fit.
Yeah, and the way the draws worked out, Cian, like obviously they have a Montpellier away this Saturday, which is a very tough ask. Montpellier put up a big score against Perpignan and look to be really targeting this, and they have some big names in their team. But Zebre or the Dragons would await in the semi-final because of 2 upsets at the weekend. Like the Dragons turned over Stade Francais in Stade Francais, and then Zebre beat Pau Wales. So if they can go to Montpellier and get a big result, all of a sudden they'd have a very winnable semi-final, and that really is looking ahead. But at the moment, that doesn't seem too fanciful to go to Montpellier and win. They almost beat them during the pool stages. They had a big lead and let it slip. And the way they're playing at the moment, you would back them, I think, to at least go over there and give it a good rattle and be very competitive.
Yeah, I was flicking back through the Montpellier game, Will, from the pool stages just to remind myself of it. Connacht were 31-14 up with 15 minutes to go in that game, and they absolutely threw it away with 3 late concessions. But I think the Connacht team from then to now are night and day for the reasons that Luke has outlined there, because we knew what Stuart Lancaster was going to bring in terms of the attack. But I think my understanding is since he's come in, obviously he coaches attack and defence, but he really has been focusing on the defensive side of things, and I think we're seeing that. And even if you look at the Sharks on Friday night, like I think they recognised Connacht's defensive improvements because they just kept taking 3 points. And I know it's cup rugby, but I think that was a big compliment to Connacht. And I'd like to single out a few individuals who I thought were immense. I thought Billy Bohan and Sam Illo in the front row were superb. I mean, Billy Bohan looks like he has a huge future ahead of him. 2 ex-Leinster guys who obviously didn't make it at their home province, but Sam Illo was very impressive earlier in the season and kind of stalled a little bit, but he's looked really good more recently now as well. And I think you touched on the 6-game winning run, Will. I think central to the majority of that has been Bundy Aki. Once again at the weekend, Luke touched on, getting your top class guys on the ball to make something happen. Just the subtlety of his passing, for his pass that created Che Mullins' try, wasn't it? It was just absolute beauty. He looks like he's back to his best, obviously playing with a bit of a point to prove as well. Obviously Sam Gilbert kicking brilliantly. So it's a tough game, like you said, Will. Montpellier have won the Challenge Cup twice before, so I don't think they're the type of French team who, especially the quarterfinal, are going to take their eye off the ball. But I think the Connacht team that will be going over there at the weekend are much better, in a much stronger position, and I think they'll give them a right good rattle.
It's funny, Cian, Matthew Devine's been playing really well.
He was the other one, yeah.
Great player. God, he's so nippy, isn't he?
Well, Ulster fans will be delighted. So Ulster fans watching him every match are going to be chuffed because he's obviously leaving at the end of the season to go there. But it's a pity he's leaving. Obviously,
Connacht made a complete balls of that, Will. A complete balls of that. And he's only signed a 1-year deal. It'll be very interesting to see what he does after that 1 year, because he's going to have to go up there and compete with Nathan Doak. But Connacht fans are up in arms about this, and they're right to be. A young homegrown scrum half, so exciting to be going to one of your main rivals is not a good look.
Well, I suppose because
it was only a 1 year.
Yeah,
they have 4 scrum halves at the moment, I suppose, Cian. I suppose so. Caelan Blade, Colin Riley, Ben Murphy, Matthew Devine. Now, just from my vantage point, I would have liked to have seen kind of Ben Murphy and Matthew Devine as my kind of main two. I know Craig Blade, to be fair, has been an unbelievable servant to Connacht, has been there his whole career, and I'm not trying to like push him out the door or anything like that, but there's an age thing as well. Like Matthew Devine is a fair bit younger and has a longer road left to run his career. But yeah, I saw Stuart Lancaster talking about it, and he was saying, look, we offered him a contract and he said no. Like it's his decision. We can't force him to say if he doesn't want to. But it's kind of been an interesting kind of subplot bubbling all season in the background.
Yeah, like it's not. I don't think it's as straightforward as that they offered him a contract and he didn't play, like he didn't sign it. I think there was other things going on behind the scenes. His game time has been like, he's had very little game time. Obviously, in the last couple of weeks, he's played more. He's an ambitious guy. Like a couple of years ago, or was it last year? Rog tried to sign him for La Rochelle, which is a massive vote of confidence in itself. And yeah, Luke, my understanding is, I think it might have been announced at the time. If it hasn't, it's my understanding that it's a 1-year deal, which is obviously unusual enough. So it'll be interesting to see if it's a short-term stay at Belfast, because like I said, he's gone up there competing with Nathan Doak, who is like the golden boy of Ulster rugby, so he's not guaranteed to be first choice there either.
Yeah,
but I suppose he's expecting to be in the 23 every week, isn't he? That's obviously what he's hoping to be, and then obviously work your way in.
Yeah, Mark Sexton was a big draw, I think, as well, to go back up to work with Mark Sexton, I believe.
Yeah, he seems to be very highly regarded, doesn't he? It's good to hear. Nice, good to see an Irish coach having an impact and being able to draw players to you. I that's good to hear you say that. I like that. I think it's funny because players they'll have the inside track. I think we're always kind of guessing, we're interviewing, we're kind of sitting a little bit on the outside, or probably somewhere in the middle between maybe the outside and the inside. But players going somewhere to a coach, that tells you something. That means the guy can sell his project, or you've either heard great things about him from the other players up there. There's no way Matthew hasn't spoken to some of the Ulster guys going, listen, what's the story with this guy? Or obviously knows him from his own experience clearly as well. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? I like to hear that. And interesting, the 1-year contract. I mean, it's I wonder who's advising him. Obviously he's backing himself to either go somewhere else or to get a bigger contract somewhere else. I really like that. I think it's a big, he's a young guy. It's risky, but I like seeing him take the risk and kind of to me, 1 year says you're really backing yourself. And maybe it also probably says that the contract they offered you was crap.
Yeah, I was going to say,
backing yourself to get a better one.
It's another element to it that just makes the whole situation very strange. Like, you don't like a good young homegrown player who's playing well, hasn't been getting much of game time, and now is leaving just to sign a 1-year deal elsewhere. It's not as if he got this blockbuster offer that I have to leave now. So yeah, as Cian said, there's obviously stuff going on behind the scenes there, but he's playing well at the moment. That's the most important thing from a Connacht perspective. He's looking really sharp. So today, this Saturday against Montpellier, he'll be needed if they're to get over the line there. But what an opportunity they have if they could win there and go on to maybe play Zebra or the Dragons. Goes back to the pool stage, though, as you mentioned, the Montpellier game. They were also 21-0 up against the Ospreys away from home as well and lost. So if they'd won either of those games, it would have probably given them a home quarter final and potentially even a home semi-final as well if they'd been able to get over the line on both of them. Ulster also into the quarterfinals, Cian. They beat Ospreys 28-24. Very fortunate, though. I don't know if you saw this forward pass decision that was given against the Ospreys with 2 or 3 minutes to go. Very, very dubious forward pass decision, I thought. And Ulster, it was actually a very good game. And the Welsh teams have been pretty. I think post Six Nations there's been kind of a rising tide lifting all the boats. I think they haven't gotten maybe as many results as they would have liked. But Scarlets against Leinster, the Ospreys against Connacht, a forward pass in that game actually was very crucial that day too. And then obviously their performance up in Ulster. But I don't know. What did you make of that forward pass decision? Am I being too harsh? I thought it should have been a try. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I did think it should have been a try, but just there you said you're not sure if I saw it. One of the beauties of being on the road, I suppose, I was going to say in the Champions Cup, force to have it in the Challenge Cup, is that you get to watch the games in some unusual places. So on Friday night, I watched the Connacht game in Gareth Steenson's bar in Exeter. It was full of Munster fans. Great spot. Nice pint of Guinness. Give him a shout out because I met him actually. He was doing commentary at the match, the Munster game the following day. So I complimented him on his Guinness.
He's a good lad actually. I don't know him that well. He's a very highly regarded guy. Yeah. So
he's coaching He's coaching the Ireland women's team now as well. Again, obviously he's been doing it for the last year or so, and he's in again for the Six Nations. He was just saying he'd come out of camp. He's an absolute legend in Exeter. What a brilliant career he had, by the way. But
he was good in the commentary as well. Sorry, just to say, you were obviously at the game, but I thought he did a good job as a co-com as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you get a player, I suppose, just fresh out of the game, still coaching, I think it's invaluable sort of insight. But watch the Connacht game with full of Munster fans in his bar on Friday night, and let me tell you, the Munster fans were shouting for Connacht, which was unlike the Munster fans were not shouting for Leinster against La Rochelle
Oh,
when I was in
surprise,
Toulon.
surprise.
When I was in Toulon earlier
Amazing
in the
thing.
competition. And then the Ulster game, to bring it back to the Ulster game, sorry, I watched that on my phone in the terminal in the airport, in Bristol Airport, and loads of Munster fans were on their phones as well. And the guy sitting next to me, his Sky Go or whatever, was obviously just a little bit ahead of mine, because they all started roaring when the Ospreys scored the try that wasn't obviously allowed in the end. So, yeah, two unusual sort of spots, not unusual, but two interesting spots on the road. I thought it was a bad decision, I have to admit. I thought it should have been a try. I think the Ospreys can feel extremely hard done by. Like, I've watched it back a couple of times. The angle isn't quite as clear as you like to be. Like, you're kind of looking to do his hands go backwards, do his hands go forwards. But I think when there's an element of doubt there, if there is, it should always be given to the attacking team. And I think the Ospreys can feel very hard done by there. And Ulster got out of jail big time.
Yeah,
It seemed like there's a lot of these kind of mistakes. Did you see the Bath one? Like, that was so clearly a forward pass. Did you see the cock and the singer try? Did you see that? Did you see the forward pass off the scrum? Now, it's terrible defense by, I think it's Farrell from Saracens, but it's the most clear like forward pass. I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe it. I think they've made this thing so complex that. Yeah, sorry. Just to add on that, it looks like the hometown decisions were going around this weekend. Sorry, I know I'm hopping back and forth, but I just thought that was. Did anyone? I didn't hear much chat about it, but there was one overhead angle that I was like, that is a forward pass. Like, it was bizarre.
yeah, they moved on very quickly from it. Like they didn't really check it even. I don't think they even like looked at it in
Well,
detail.
they did check it, but then they did. It looked like they didn't check the right view. There was a clear view overhead. There was one. I'll send it on to you in WhatsApp. It was bizarre. It was absolutely bizarre. I just thought it was amazing that they didn't go back to it. But it was clearly not a try. And it was kind of a key point in the game. Like, I thought Saracens were quite game in that one. But sorry, to go back to Ulster, apologies. I just thought it was the other forward pass. I was thinking that was a bad decision as well. And I don't think they should be getting that many wrong.
Yeah, well, in the Ulster game, the referee didn't seem convinced that the TMO was being so kind of gung-ho about, oh, no, it's 100% a forward pass, that the referee was like, kind of like, okay, and like blowing the whistle, but he didn't seem like 100% sold himself, which is sometimes the difficulty in these interactions when the TMO is obviously sitting 2 inches away from a screen saying one thing, and the ref's like, it doesn't really look like that to me, but you obviously have a better view, but... it was a massive moment in the game. Like, Ulster were 28-17 up at one stage, and the Ospreys, fair play, came back with a try, and then it looked like they'd snatched it. But Ulster's reward, Cian, is La Rochelle, Ronan O'Gara, Friday night in Belfast. My only annoyance is that it's at the same time as Bath Northampton, which I want to watch. I want to watch both of them. I might have the double screen on Friday night. But what an opportunity it is for Ulster. Great to get another home fixture, a marquee fixture. But then Benetton away or Exeter home in the semi-final if they can beat La Rochelle. So both Irish provinces this weekend have good carrots about semi-finals to come, but the Ulster-La Rochelle game could be really good.
Yeah, it'd be a cracker. It'll be interesting to see what kind of team La Rochelle send over. I know they had a couple of their experienced players in Newcastle last weekend, but there was a lot of young guys in the team. They're down in ninth, just double checking that. Ninth in the top 14, so a real big ask to get into the top 14 playoffs. So, and they're obviously safe from relegation. So you'd imagine they'll give it a right good crack, especially obviously Rog coming back to Ireland. Any chance he gets to get one over on an Irish team is something that he'd crave. And look, I think Ulster, like, they played some really good rugby, and I go back to, mentioning Bundy Aki, Jack Crowley, your big players. I thought the way Stuart McCloskey and Nick Timoney combined for Nick Timoney's try, again, just spoke to that. Your big players stepping up at a crucial time. And like, one of the things that Clayton Macmillan said when he took over from Munster was that he wanted to raise their floor rather than raising the ceiling. And I think we're seeing that it's going to take a bit of time, but I think one of the big things that Richie Murphy has done is he's raised the floor of Ulster, in that when Ulster aren't at their best, and I don't think they were at their best against the Ospreys last week, they're still finding a way to get the job done. And I think previously that might have been a game where they might have found a way to lose it. Now, again, obviously they got out of jail big time at the end there, but I'm quite bullish, I think, on Ulster. I think the fact they have a home quarter-final again this weekend. Really important for the finances as well, lads, because I think the Munster example will have sent shockwaves through Irish rugby, that everyone needs to kind of be, you know, watching the purse strings. And the more home games you can have, the more home knockout games you can have, particularly against a big French side like La Rochelle. I'd imagine Ravenhill or Affidea Stadium, whatever it's called now, will be packed out on Friday night. And that is huge for, you know, because Ulster obviously have been in a similar situation to Munster in terms of tightening the purse strings as well. So I think Ulster are in a great place, and I think they've got a great chance to get to the semi-final.
And I agree with you on Timony, like, you know, picking that ball up off his bootlaces firstly was a great bit of handling, and then like kind of the bit of guile and power to finish off. Jacob Stockdale scored a great try as well, and I actually think Augustus is playing really well at the moment. He kind of created a really good try for Zach Ward against Edinburgh last weekend, and then I was just thought very powerful in the carry, kind of the way he was for Northampton at the end of last season, what you would have hoped from an Ulster perspective when they signed him. So yeah, I think that's about it for us, guys. As I said, Champions Cup quarterfinals this weekend. Bath Northampton, 8 p.m. on Friday night. Then Glasgow Toulon on Saturday at 3 p.m. Leinster Sale Saturday 5:30 p.m. And then Bordeaux Toulouse, the big one, Sunday at 3 p.m. And then those two Challenge Cup quarterfinals involving Irish teams. Ulster La Rochelle, as I said, Friday at 8 p.m. And then Montpellier versus Connacht Saturday 12:30 p.m. So it's kind of a triple header on Saturday, actually, if you have the time. Montpellier, Connacht, Glasgow Toulon, and then Leinster Sale. So much rugby this time of year to enjoy. So that's it for us on the left wing, sponsored by Energy. A big thanks to Cian for joining me, and to Luke as well. We'll be back next week to review the quarter-final weekend. So until then, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.